My name is Rosa Duarte and I have type 1 diabetes. If I could describe what it's like to be a type 1 diabetic in one word, I would say it's annoying. It's annoying because you have to constantly check your blood sugar levels throughout the day to make sure that they're normal, because if you have highs, you can feel really sick. If they go really low, it can be very dangerous. You can even lose consciousness if they drop to such a level, where you have to be hospitalized. So it's really important to just constantly check your blood sugar levels, make sure that they're normal, and having to inject insulin constantly. So there's not a day that goes by that I'm not reminded that I have diabetes, and it's not just once a day, it's several times a day. There's two types of diabetes. There's type 1 diabetes and there's type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is what most people have when they're diagnosed with diabetes. About 90% of the cases are type 2, and that is the one where you normally are predisposed if you have a family history, if you are overweight, and live more of a sedentary lifestyle. So the things that you can do to help combat type 2 diabetes are losing fat, especially around the abdominal area, and becoming physically active. There's also medications that you can take if you become type 2 diabetic. And what it is your body creates its own insulin, but you're just not as sensitive to it anymore. You become insulin resistant. And so that's why, there's lifestyle changes as well as medication that you take as a type 2 diabetic to help you become less insulin resistant. Type 1 diabetes, which is what I have, is normally called juvenile diabetes, but a lot of people like myself are getting diagnosed later in life. I was diagnosed in my late 20s, and there's more and more cases coming out now, apparently, of people being diagnosed in their late 20s, early 30s with type 1 diabetes, and no one really knows why, but what it is an autoimmune disorder where your body attacks the cells inside your pancreas that create insulin. So you eventually deplete all your natural insulin, and you have to end up injecting yourself with insulin with a pen, or you use an insulin pump. And that's type 1 diabetes. We have to regulate, our own insulin. So you have to find outside ways of, giving yourself insulin. And insulin is important because it is the metabolic hormone that helps break sugar down and turn it into energy. Again, I was diagnosed when I was in my late 20s. I was 27. And I was having very typical symptoms of diabetes. I was losing weight because my body was burning or using the fat cells that I had as energy instead of the sugar. So I was beginning to lose a lot of weight. I was constantly thirsty, and no matter how much water I drank, I just could not quench the thirst. I was going to the bathroom a lot, and I thought it was because I was drinking so much water, but really what was happening was I was literally pissing away all this extra sugar that was just sitting around in my bloodstream. My body was just trying to find ways of getting rid of it all. So those were two symptoms, and the third one was I would get tired very, very quickly. So just going up a flight of stairs, I would just exhaust me. So those were the symptoms I was having. And around Christmas time, I was having these symptoms for about maybe 2.5, 3 months. And around Christmas time, we were having dinner with my husband's family, and one of our family members had recently been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and he obviously was grown, so he was another one of those weird cases being diagnosed later on in life. But he had his glucose meter with him, which is what we use to, measure our blood sugar. And I'm explaining my symptoms, and he said, "Oh, it kind of sounds like you might have diabetes." And I looked at him and I said, "There's no way, what? I've never even had allergies." But turns out, I pricked myself at the dinner table, and my numbers were 354. If you know anything about blood sugar, your normal range is between 80 to 120. So 354 is pretty darn high. But I was lucky because I've heard of type 1 diabetics or even type 2 diabetics getting diagnosed, and their numbers are like up in the 600-700 range, having to be hospitalized. So I guess I was lucky. And early detection, obviously, just pay attention to your body. I knew something was wrong, and I wish I had done something sooner about it, but I'm glad that I caught it when I did. So I immediately made an appointment with the doctor, did some blood tests, and the results came back. It said you do have diabetes. I'll never forget it, January 12th, 2009. It just kind of like singed right into my head. And I was very shocked. Obviously, I was surprised. It wasn't something that I expected ever to hear, that I would be diagnosed with a chronic illness. I never even had allergies, so to be diagnosed with something like diabetes, I was very disheartened and almost in denial for the first couple of months. But you can't be with diabetes. You have to get on top of it right away. You cannot be lazy with this disease because the longer you go without treatment, without proper maintenance, the more at risk you will be for those horrible complications that you Google about, like going blind and losing your fingers. That can happen, but only if you let your numbers go out of control for a really long time. So I immediately tried to get on top of it and began to take insulin. And it's what I have every day in my purse. I have my insulin pen and I have my glucose meter. So it's what I have. This is the insulin that I take to eat with, and then I have a long-term insulin that I take at night, just because you need something to kind of hold you over at night. And some people even inject the long-term insulin during the day too. So depending on what your needs are as a diabetic. But yeah, so I'm constantly pricking and testing myself now, only because if I don't, you just can't let it get away with you. You have to stay on top of it. I definitely say that being anal retentive or having like type A personality helps with an illness like diabetes, because just like I said, you have to stay on top of it. But as long as you're on it and you are checking yourself and taking the medication and eating right and exercising, all of those things that even I do as a type 1 diabetic, I avoid certain foods. I don't eat pasta just because the carbohydrates in that is so high, which eventually turn into sugar. So I try to eat foods that will not make me take so much insulin. I try to keep injecting myself as little as possible. So, there are things you can do, and it is manageable. Don't be afraid if you've been diagnosed, either with type 1 or type 2 diabetes. Just know you're not alone. There's so many people out there who have diabetes now, unfortunately, but you can take control of it and help yourself live through it. You can live a normal, healthy life. And as a type 1 diabetic, I have to say, because it is chronic and there's no reversing it, I've tried to live as most normal life as I have. I've had it now for 9 years. I've hiked sections of the Appalachian Trail. I've run a half marathon, a 10K, several 5Ks. I recently had a baby. She'll be 3 months in a couple of days, and I'm breastfeeding her. There's all these things that I thought would be an obstacle for me, that diabetes would be this obstacle. But really in the end, it's helped me be more healthy. Just because I am constantly aware of what I'm eating, what I'm doing, and I'm always checking my, my sugar levels to make sure that, that they're okay. So thank you so much for watching. I really hope that this video helped. And if you have any questions or comments, just make sure to share them with me, and I'd be more than happy to share future insights with you as a type 1 diabetic, being a mom, as far as exercise is concerned, even what I do on a daily routine with diet also, I find really, really helps. So looking forward to hearing from you, and thanks again for watching.